So first, we will be going over how memory works and the different theories surrounding how memories works done by multiple famous psychologists. Next, we will also talk about how problem solving and decision making can really make a very big impact on studying for a test. And finally, I'll just give you guys some more pointers and tips that I personally know as well that are still rooted deeply in psychological analysis. So, memory can be broken down into three basic stages, you could say. The first one's encoding, the second one is storage, and the third one is rehearsal. So you can just think of it simply as encoding is the process of information getting into your brain, and then storage is, of course, storing the information, and then retrieval is taking that information from your storage and then using it for whatever purposes you might need. So one of the hardest parts, of course, is getting that information into your brain in the first place. And that's why we have our encoding tips over here to help us. So the first basic tip is called mnemonics. Mnemonics? That's a hard word to say. Mnemonics. So mnemonics are organizational structures that can make information much more memorable, because you have this new information over here, and by linking that new information to already existing information, it just makes it much easier to remember. So the most common example of a mnemonic is through acronyms. Things like NASA, instead of having to remember the National Aeronautic Space Administration, which is a mouthful to say, you could just remember it as NASA. And it just makes it so much more easier to remember. Another way, if any of you guys have taken geometry, is SOHCAHTOA for sine, cosine, and tangent. So acronyms are a really good way to remember things pretty easily. Another one is called chunking, where you basically group related information together into one group, and then the rest go into another group, and then the rest go into another group, and then it just keeps on going. This is especially useful for longer chunks of information, like a 10-minute speech that you have to memorize right before a debate tournament because you've just kept slacking off the entire week. I'm doing okay, by the way. So chunking is probably the most useful thing ever for memorizing long speeches or long questions and answers. And by breaking these down into smaller chunks, it just makes it a lot more easier to get that information into your brain. And chunking can also be spliced together with categories. Instead of just randomly grouping information together, you can group them based on categories, such as a theme or any other sort of organizational structure that you might use. And another way to remember effectively is by the spacing effect. And the spacing effect is basically that encoding is so much more easier when information is rehearsed in multiple sessions over many intervals. So what this basically entails is that instead of practicing your 10-minute speech for a debate tournament on the night before it's due, you should instead take the entire week and just practice it for 20 minutes every day, just right before bedtime. And doing those 20 minutes over 5 days is much more effective than doing it 100 minutes the night before a speech and debate tournament. Do not try it. It was really bad. And more ways to make memory retrieval much more easier and effective. It just depends on the state you are in when you learn that information So this is something we call context-dependent memory in psychology, where the recall of information should be in the same environment in which it was acquired. So, for example, when you're studying on a desk in your own room, when you later take any sort of practice quiz in that same room, your actual memory retrieval has been shown to be much more effective than if you were taking that test in the abandoned woods in the middle of nowhere. And it's also the same with mood, which we call mood congruent memory. If you were learning something when you were in a specific mood, like you were really focused or really energetic or excited, then when you're in that same mood again, it's much easier to recall that same information. And speaking of quizzes, another effective way to really retrieve and encode memory is through what's called the testing effect, which is pretty self-explanatory, where testing and self-assessments have actually been shown that they boost your ability to remember information drastically. Of course, even if you study, things don't always go to plan, and that's why you fail. And there are a few reasons that this might happen, and sometimes it can just be called an encoding failure, when memory just wasn't formed in the first place. And the main way to fix that is, again, to just keep practicing, keep rehearsing, and just hope that by practicing enough times that the memory is formed in the first place. You know New York, you need New York. You know you need unique New York. You know New York, you need New York. You know you need unique New York. Another reason that you might be forgetting things or that your memories are getting distorted is because of interference. There's two main types of interference. The first one's called retroactive interference, in which new memories make it harder to remember old memories. Hey man, what's the problem? I just read this Dune book and it is like, I mean, it's alright, I guess. And then I watched this new movie, Dune. This is that adaptation. And after watching that new movie, I just can't really remember anything about the book anymore. And the other way around for this is called proactive interference, where past memories interfere with how you might recall newer memories. And for me, this just happens with piano all the time, and it's so annoying. Guys, I just learned this new song, and it's so incredibly good.
This is the most beautiful sound that this piano has ever made. Don't know.
And also, I learned this one song like ages ago, and it's like so incredibly good as well. Here, let me show you.